We discuss what Jake Fisher had to say, and we're going to tie it in to what Sam Amick then said, because it all kind of gets thrown into a blender or a smoothie in this Kings situation, if you will. So on Sunday, Jake Fisher comes out and he has a whole list of things that he wanted to break down. And he says, Kings open to trading anybody except Nick Clifford or Keegan Murray. Now, Keegan just signed, so Keegan couldn't be moved this season. He'd have to be moved in the offseason or once the season ends. Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Russell Westbrook, and others are reportedly available. Now, not if you're driving, but in your mind, raise your hand if this is a surprise. Raise your hand if you are surprised by this information. Because I don't think anybody, especially if you're driving, but I don't think anybody is raising their hands right now. If you've been listening to the Alan Sal Show, if you've been listening to Carmichael Dave and Jason Ross, if you've been listening to the Drive Guys, if you follow people like Matt George, nobody should be raising their hands, right? That's nothing on Jake Fisher, but obviously we are more so in the weeds out here in Sacramento than from a national standpoint. It was dang near more so about other teams and their interest level and having fans of other teams salivate and drool over getting a Domantas Sabonis. Jake went on to talk about, and we got this sound that we'll play for you, but Jake went on to talk about Domantas Sabonis and his fit with Bam Adebayo and guys like that. So it's more so about letting the rest of the basketball and the basketball world know what we already knew, because nobody is surprised. You're not trading Nick Clifford, who is Scott Perry's first real imprint on this roster. Why would they do that? Now, again, Carmichael Dave comes out. Carmichael Dave comes out about a couple hours later and says, I want to speak on this report. And the reality is everybody can be moved. Everybody's got a price tag, even Luka, right? So it's a technicality and maybe semantics, but there is a priority list in who they would want to move and who they don't want to move. But if at the end of the season, if some team comes with if Keegan keeps playing like this and a team comes with an offer, 3 first-rounders, something ridiculous, because they think Keegan is the perfect third option for them, and they like his price tag. I know some people think it's a little much, but they like his price tag. Scott Perry is most likely not saying no to that. So Dave came out and said, look, all love to Jake Fisher. What him and Mark Stein do, they do impeccable work. But the reality is nobody is actually untouchable. Nobody is actually untouchable. Everybody has a price tag. But the thought process is y'all probably aren't going to get to the price tag that we would want. So even though it's a semantics thing, but technically nobody on that roster is untouchable besides Keegan Murray until the end of the season. That's what Dave came out and said. So now that we know that, and to start to combine what Sam Amick has said about Keon Ellis, I think we might need to get ready for our goodbyes, Kyle.
Okay, so the Keon specific point, yes, because it seems like there's just enough need across the league for someone to go offense-defense with a 2-guard, and just not a lot of options available. Like, unless the Clippers are going to part with Chris Dunn, which he's on an amazing contract right now. Unless the Clippers are going to part with Chris Dunn, he's kind of the premier 3-and-D 2-guard that's going to be available on the market.
Yeah.
If they get a first-round pick, even if it's not a premium first-round pick, it's better than risking letting him go to unrestricted free agency. And that's kind of the thought process, I guess, with Keon. Now, we'll see what they end up getting. If they only get offered 2 seconds or a conditional first or something, then, maybe they just don't go through with it. But it seems like as long as the price is right, it's a fairly straightforward transaction because every team can absorb him into their salary cap space.
Yeah.
He's only making $2 million.
Right. So the Kings have some decisions to make. Obviously, it would be interesting, Kyle, because of how little Keon's making, depending on what you give up, you could see him as a rental. Obviously, you'd like to sign him if you are one of these teams. But if you're the Thunder, right? Because they're bringing up who is it? Isaac Joe and some of these guys.
Isaiah Joe.
And
AJ Mitchell.
Who I think AJ Mitchell can ball. But somebody like them who has a bunch of first rounders to spare, they look in their wallet, they dig in their pockets and they find other first rounders. That's one thing. But I'm confused, or not confused, but I am interested to see what happens with Keon because he is going to be a free agent. So are you willing to give up a first rounder for a rental? Is there a way? And we want to have on Yossi Gozlin, who we've had on before. He's got a new job, so we're trying to work around schedules. But the question I have is, Kyle, is if you trade Keon, and what I'm assuming is you trade him in January, and then I'm assuming that team could, because in February he would be extension eligible. So I would assume if we're giving up the 18th overall pick for Keon, we want him for this season, but then we traded for him in January, then in February we extend him. That's what my assumption would be on this.
I think it depends on the team, right? So if I go through the list of teams that kind of have that low-level pick, like Minnesota has the 20th pick in the draft. They could really use a Keon Ellis. I mean, him replacing Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Yeah, he's taller, according to Basketball Reference.
Oh, you could argue it's an upgrade from Keon to Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
I guess.
You could.
You could.
I'm not saying he is for certain. I'm saying you could make the argument.
Nickeil just dropped like 34 points last week.
Sure.
I get you.
But you could. Keon's had 30 points, or 29. I think 29 is his career high. But anyways, you could make that argument. But Minnesota would have to find a way to create cap space, whether that's, trading for Ja Morant or whatever else they do. Like, Minnesota's got to find some way to create cap space if they wanted to sign Keon. Again, there's a lot of in the weeds stuff we could get into. Like, if you sign him for your mid-level exception, does that make it easier for the incoming team to sign him? He doesn't have bird rights. Again, there's a lot of in the weeds stuff that we don't have to talk about. But yeah, I think any team that trades for him would like to have him be part of their long-term core, but that's not necessarily prohibitive for making it. Like, you could still trade for him and not re-sign him.
I'm seeing this text, and it does remind me of something that is a bit confusing, right? So the 916 says, just a little surprised about Keon being available since he seems to be what Scott Perry is looking for. There is a disconnect there. I don't know what it is, but now that Scott Perry, I do feel like, and we're going to get deeper into the Sam Amick article, I do feel like there is something missing, because if you deep down knew that this team was probably not going to end up in a parade, right? If you deep down you knew that, then why make the moves that you made and hang with me, the domino effect of moving Jonas Valanciunas to clear up that money to get a Dennis Schroeder, who, number one, will take minutes away from Keon, even though I know Keon's more of a shooting guard wing, but take that money away, and then on top of that, put you in a position, as you gave Dennis Schroeder that money, put you in a position to where you have to pick up Keon's option because you're trying to save a little bit of cash. That, and now Keon could be a unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. That doesn't make sense to me. And then on top of that, because the answer that I heard was, well, if Keon balls out, right? If Keon balls out, they can still come to an extension in February. Then on top of that, to triple down and go get Russell Westbrook, even though he's played well, now Keon just didn't even play last game. I will say, some of the things, and maybe this is a situation where Scott Perry cannot say, look, I have full autonomy, but there were some moves that I pick your battles, right? There were some pick your battle moves. That's how I'll phrase it, that had to be made to make it clear to my boss that we were trying to contend. and collateral damage that might come out of that is Keon Ellis. Now, let's be honest here. If I'm Scott Perry, my thought process is Keon Ellis is 26 years old. I like Keon Ellis. I think he can play. But if he had to possibly be a sacrificial lamb, and a sacrificial lamb that could net us a first-round pick, possibly, that's just something that we had to do. Unless you thought that Keon was going to be some version of the next savior, Scott Perry had to make some decisions, and it seems like one of those decisions was, hey, we have to make some moves. I need to show that we are attempting to contend, and in showing that, we might possibly lose Keon. The hope is that we can trade him and get some value, but at that time, we were working around the fringes, trying to show and I don't know why you had to commit to Dennis Schroeder that much, but trying to show to my boss, to the good people that pay for the season. If you have season tickets, the season ticket holders, that we're trying to contend. Do I think they had to give him 3 years? I know it's only 2 years guaranteed. I don't know. I don't know what the market was. Doesn't feel like it though. And because of that, we are, in a way, quote unquote, sacrificing Keon Ellis, but it's not a sacrifice, as we talked about during the summer. If you can get, let's not forget, Neek was 26th pick. If you sacrifice Keon Ellis and you go get my boy Neo from Virginia Tech because you got the 18th pick and he's projected to be a late teener right now, then you kind of won. Let's not forget, Keon's nickname, besides Ellis Island, was House Money. So if you can flip Keon for another for a first rounder when he was undrafted from a different regime, and you don't think that he is going to be a game changer specifically for what you're looking for, would he be this is what I said in the summer, I got killed for it. Could he be a game changer on a current contender? Yes. But Keon said it himself. I'm not going to be, a first, second option in this league. So Scott Perry's essentially saying, I had to make some moves to appease whoever you want to call it, right? Ownership, whoever. I had to make some of those moves. But I made some of those moves understanding that we still are in a position to, if we do lose Keon, it ain't going to be for nothing. As Sam Amick writes, Keon has the most value. So let's save this money. Let's see what happens with Dennis Schroeder, another super movable contract. And if we do lose Keon, we ain't going to lose him for some Doritos and not even the Cool Ranch ones.
Well, one clarification of what you just said. It's not that he has the most value. It's that he is the most coveted.
Sure, yes.
Which is just to say more teams are interested in him, which I can only because he's obviously not better than all the other guys we're talking about here. But the contract is the thing that people want to trade for, because any team, any contender can just slot him in at $2 million.
Right, and that answers the question, Kyle, why would anybody pay a first-round pick for a guy that can get in free agency for the MLE? Because time is of the essence.
Well, because if you get him in free agency, he's going to be $10 to $15 million a year. Now, you can have a 10 to 15 million. Like, let's use the Minnesota example. If Minnesota were to sign Keon Ellis, they would have to either go into the second apron or make a subsequent trade to lower their value. Right now, they can just plop him in for a trade exception, or if they want, they can trade, some deep bench guy making a minimum, and they can still slot Keon in at that $2 million. They can add him without having to get rid of any core piece.
Yeah.
You can't do that in free agency. Every team can't. Some teams can, not every team. It just
gives you more. Every team is looking for any nook and cranny of flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Even if they're not going to bring him in after this year. But again, if you don't plan to re-sign him, then your offer's probably less and you're not going to get him.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. But to the Scott Perry point, I just think his ship is more connected to Neek Clifford. And if he had it his way, I think he'd rather Neek Clifford be the long-term starting two on the Kings than signing Keon Ellis and trying to make him the long-term starting two after Zach and DeMar are gone, right? They'd rather go younger. The guy he drafted and who's under team control for 8 years at or at least 4 years at relatively cheap.
Keon, Malik, these are all guys that were close to that are close to their ceiling. I think Malik is clearly closer to his ceiling than Keon, but Scott Perry is assessing the situation. The Devin Carter thing, I just don't think they believe there's a lot of value there, right? And I don't know how that connects to Doug and his playing time, but there is not a large commitment to Devin Carter. That's what we do know. But for all these other guys, I think one thing that people need to remember, and I do think it is a big deal, is they're trying to get younger. I mean, Keon, he is only 25. I called him 26. Sorry, Keon. He is only 25. But where you think these guys are going, again, I think they could have held on to him personally. But I think the way Scott Perry is looking at it is there's no, in my opinion, there's no way you lose Keon for nothing. Because if nobody is, here's the other thing. And we had multiple people on during the summer, during the offseason. If nobody trades for Keon, they still have a decision to make. We've learned this in other situations. If DeMar is gone by February and they don't trade Keon, if DeMar is gone, we're going to talk about Zach LaVine, some big news on Zach LaVine. If DeMar is gone and Zach LaVine it's possible that he opts out of this, I don't even need to go Zach LaVine, Malik Monk. If DeMar is gone and Malik Monk is gone and nobody does end up trading, let's say the Kings don't like what's out there for Keon has a decision. It's kind of messed up, but his value could be a little bit depressed because he hadn't been playing. Now Keon has to look himself in the mirror if the Kings offer him an extension in February and say, am I that salty at the Kings that I'm going to turn them down and take my chances in free agency when I'm a two-way guy, an undrafted guy who's never had to go through this process before? Do I think I'm going to make that type of money on the open market? Or do I say, you know what? I've been, again, who did Malik Monk say was the most transparent GM he's ever worked with? Scott Perry. Or does Scott Perry do what we know he's good at doing, have conversations with Keon? Could he be currently still having conversations with Keon? Hey, just hang in there. He is the type of player that Keon likes. And once this thing gets moved, hey, we've always liked you. It's February. Here's our extension. DeMar is gone. Malik is gone. It's y'all in the crew, right? Or it doesn't work out, and Scott Perry moves him for whatever respectable value he deems out there before the deadline. So I just think, in Scott Perry's opinion, they're not going to lose him for nothing. Now, it's possible Keon says, bleep you, but I think the goal is that before the trade deadline ends, there will be an understanding in that building that Keon is either going to say bleep you and test free agency or is willing to sign an extension. That's why I think Scott Perry does not see a world where you're losing Keon Ellis for nothing. That's how he could see that world. He could see that world. I'm not saying that's the reality. I'm saying that would, hey, we had a conversation and then Keon at the last second or whatever says, you know what, I actually am gonna test free agency, and then you lose him. That's still a possibility. I'm telling you what I believe to be Scott Perry's thought process.
See, because the tough part about that is the direction that they're going after this year. So I'm gonna throw a random example out there. Let's say DeRozan does get moved to the Clippers and they get like Bogdanovich and a second round pick, basically. And by the way, the Clippers have pick 38 and 40 this year.
Okay.
So let's just say you get one of them and then maybe like a future seventh grader or something. If they get 38, then the Sacramento Kings next year would have their first round pick, their second round pick, which right now is at the top of the draft, Charlotte's second round pick, which is at the top of the second round, and a Clippers second, which comes from the Clippers. So, could be in the 40s, kind of where Maxime was picked, right? You're bringing in 4 rookies on top of Keegan and Maxime and Neek Clifford, and maybe Devin Carter will still be on the team.
But Kyle, we're talking about second rounders here.
But I'm saying that you only get but so many roster spots.
No, I hear you.
So I'm saying they're going to prioritize the Scott Perry people over potentially a Keon Ellis type if next year is all about development, right? They have a chance right now to bring in 4, 5 young guys, all have them align the timelines, get younger, and then by 2027, all the money is off the books. The way Scott Perry is moving, it tells me that they don't plan to have Keon be part of the team beyond 2026 in some capacity, because otherwise, why would you decline the option, or why would you accept the option in the summer just to bring in a Dennis Schroeder who also isn't going to be on the team past 2027?
Yeah, I think the more realistic thought here is that Scott Perry never has to answer that, because Keon does get moved for a late first rounder, and then they can say, well, we were hoping to extend with Keon, but we couldn't say no to a first rounder when you're flipping an undrafted guy to a first round pick. And then we all say, you know what? He's kind of right. I think that's the hope, that he never has to answer that question. So I believe you're correct. If Keon makes it past the trade deadline, then I would say that your thought process is probably incorrect, because it would be a bad look to lose him for nothing.
Yeah, but if I'm Keon, unless the Kings have completely flipped and are like, we're actually going to offer you 4 years, $70 million. If I'm Keon, I'll just hit free agency.
But that's what, yes, we're not saying different things. I'm saying I believe Scott Perry is good enough to deduce if that's probably going to be the case. And if it turns into a high second round pick, we might not like it as much. I would like it to be a first rounder, but he might say, look, we're going to lose. We knew this was going to be the case. We thought maybe we could get Keon to a low first rounder, but let's just do this. Let's just do this good second round pick, and Keon, good luck.
And maybe we'll get a future 7th grader or something we can use.
Something, a pick swapper, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the other part of it, is like, if Keon is so coveted in the way that Sam Amick is talking about, then they should have no problem getting a market value offer. Now, if that for some reason doesn't come in, or Keon gets hurt or something like that, then you can reevaluate it.
Well, he can't get hurt now. He's not playing.
Yeah, he's not 0 minutes.
He's safe. He's safe right now. Knock on wood. All right. On the other side, does Domantas Sabonis make sense in Miami? I don't see it, but apparently others do. Let's hear what Jake Fisher had to say. Don't move. Alan Salas, Sactown Sports.